What am I doing? I'm talking to an empty telephone.
I don't understand.
Because there was a dead man on the other end of this fucking line.
Modern Horror Auteurs, Hereditary, Midsommar, Get Out, Us. All I know is sometimes if there's too many white people on the podcast, I get nervous, Welcome to Corona Cinema. I'm Leon Waite, and I'm joined as always by Ross.
Hello.
Matty.
Good evening.
And Mason.
You all right?
And we begin this week with Mason's pick, which is Hereditary from 2018. After the death of her mother, artist Annie and her family uncover their terrifying legacy and grapple with malevolent forces beyond their control. Starring Toni Collette, Gabriel Byrne, Alex Wolff, and Millie Shapiro. This is the first of our double bill for Ari Aster films. And he wrote and directed this one, as well as Midsommar, which is coming up. But Mason, why did you pick Hereditary?
So I remember a few years ago when this first came out, I remember seeing trailers for it quite a lot at the cinema and thinking, oh, like, perfect, this is going to be another sort of standard horror film, similar to like The Conjuring, stuff like that. Nothing that breaks the mold. And then when I actually came to watch it, that's what I've enjoyed so much about the film, is that it wasn't just a typical modern day horror. It has that sort of like uniqueness to it, which makes it all that more enjoyable. Like when you look at it on the surface, it is like the same formula as any other horror film sort of today. But for some reason, this one just seems to sort of stick with me and seems to be like above the rest. What I really enjoy about the film is that when you like initially watch the trailer, you assume that the Charlie girl is going to be sort of like the main focus of the film. She's going to be like this possessed girl who's going to scare you sort of throughout. And then the film's really bold in killing her within the first half of the film. And realistically, the whole film is revolved around the characters dealing with her death, along with the nan's death that happens sort of just before as well. So I enjoy how the trailer sort of tricks you into believing it's going to be solely focused on Charlie when it's nothing. Yeah, she's not in it at all, really. I also like how in this horror film, it's not like I've said already, it's not like the sort of Conjuring type of films where they're all fine by the end and everyone makes it out alive. In this film, the whole family dies pretty much. You've got the lad who survives, but I don't know how much you call that surviving when he's now like joined this cult and stuff. But generally, when you watch the film, I don't think it falls flat at any point. I think it keeps you engaged, and I think it just gives an example of how horror films that typically have been simplistic for years can actually have depth and can have good acting and feel high budget instead of just hitting you with the typical like, cheap scares. So I think when you have all of that sort of rounded up together into one film, you have something like Hereditary, which, yeah, for me, is just sort of stands above the rest of a lot of horror films that I've seen in the past 10 or so years, really.
Yeah, I was shocked at how early Charlie, the little girl, how early she actually does die, and that you have that gruesome incident. Because this week was the first time I watched it since cinema, and you kind of assume based on the marketing and based on her like creepy presence on screen, you presume she was going to be a bit more of a major character. So when it was like, what, we're only like they were at the party and it had only been like 30 minutes. So I was like, what? Surely she's going to die like pretty soon. So that was quite shocking. And yeah, like, I agree with what you say, how this kind of elevates it above a lot of similar like cheap, potentially cheap horrors, because you have this like poignant story just about a family dealing with loss on one hand, and then dealing with like the effects of what your family has done in the past, which is like obviously what the title would suggest. And then you've got the horror elements kind of surrounding it. And yeah, go back to that scene when her head is hacked off. Like everything about that was just done so well. Like even knowing what was going to happen this time around, like all the little details, like the way he just stops, slowly drives away. Then when he gets back to the house and is walking up to his room, you don't see him. You can hear the voice of his mum and dad, and they're like, okay, good, they're home. Like, you just hear a voice like, okay, everything's cool. He's just going back to his bed. He has no idea what he's going to say, which I imagine if you just essentially, well, not murdered, but responsible for the death of your sibling, and you go back to your house, like, yeah, man, I'll sleep it off, you know. Like, but and then you don't even see, you never actually see her body, because he goes up to his room, it fixes on his face for the whole time, as you hear the mum's reaction as she goes down to the car. She's just going to the shop, and that's when she obviously sees the body. We never actually see the body. It just cuts quickly to the severed head, which is a bit grim. But everything about that was just done really well, I thought, and added to the effect of it. And then I didn't realize as well, it's based on an actual incident. This happened this happened in 2005, or in real life, which is a bit clapped. But yeah, Ross, apparently heard you had that spoiled for you when you watched Hereditary the first time round. But did you still think it was well done enough that it gripped you nonetheless?
Yeah, because what happened was something that happened, and my girlfriend was like, "Oh, it's like when in Hereditary when the girl gets her head knocked off." I was like, "Oh, I've never seen that, so thanks." But yeah, it's just the way it kind of happens, and you're like, "Shit," and it just focuses on his face, and nothing really happens apart from being on his face for like 5 minutes. Or at least like a few minutes, and then as you said, it kind of, you hear the background noise, but it just works so well, and like you can see from the acting, just from facial expressions, like kind of what's happened and how shocked he is, and it's so well done, and it's a moment in a film that you don't really forget. Like when you think of Hereditary, you probably think of that moment, but it's just so well directed, and considering it's Ari Aster's first film, the whole thing is so well directed and so well done. It looks like someone who is an experienced filmmaker has done this, and really, like, hats off to him, like, for doing this. But yeah, the film in general, though, it's not. I wouldn't say it's scary. It's more like kind of creepy and shocking and disturbing. It's kind of hard to put into words how to explain it, and like, yeah, it's the second time I've seen it, and it's really interesting watching it now. Kind of I focus more on kind of the spiritual and the culty stuff that happens in the film, and it's still really interesting on that second watch because, I was just kind of looking out for that kind of stuff, and you can see how much detail RS has really put into the whole thing. And in terms of her dying really early on as well, obviously, kind of it gives you Psycho vibes, because that kind of broke the ground in Psycho, having like a main character you think the film's about for the first like half hour or so. Then that happens, and you're like, oh shit, it's the same kind of vibe that you get from Psycho, and it's probably inspired by that, I imagine. But yeah, really well done, that bit, and the acting as well in this film. Say Toni Collette and Alex Wolff, they're both so good in this film, and yeah, make a great watch.
Yeah, I think Toni Collette is like incredible in this film, and we've got coming up on this podcast one of the biggest Oscar stubs of all time for me, and I think she, maybe not all time for her, but definitely of that year. If this film had a bigger backing, campaign more, she definitely would have been nominated, because this is a really good performance. Yeah, I think the only issue I do have is I think the ending kind of spoils the film for me a bit. I felt like this at the time, and rewatching it, because ultimately it's kind of more mysterious when you don't know the reason behind why they're experiencing all these kind of supernatural things. But when you spell it out so explicitly, I thought it kind of detracted from the like mystery of the film, or that the kind of the creepiness of the film, because ultimately it descends into chaos by the end, and a lot of it I felt was kind of unintentionally funny, which is not what you want. Like his next film we're going to talk about was deliberately funny, whilst still being a creepy film. But this one definitely wasn't intended to be funny. But like when the dad gets set on fire, like like it wasn't really scary or shocking. It was just like, okay. And when she's like scaling the walls, banging her head, then you got all these naked old people. I thought it just became a bit too chaotic, and the supernatural elements came to the fore too much for me, and have kind of spoiled the film. Mason, is that something you can relate to?
Yeah, I think the ending summit, I still just can't really make my mind up on if I like it or not. Like you said, that whole sort of like the last 20 minutes is so chaotic with so much going on. I feel like if you only had half of like the events that happen within the last 20 minutes, it would be fine. But instead, you just get thrown at all this stuff. Like the whole naked people stuff, I just don't understand. It doesn't really fit the tone or anything. It's just like there for the sake of being there to try and be scary. And that's when the film does sort of lose its like higher standard in that sense. Um, the whole point when she's like scaling the walls and stuff, that works for me. Or even when she like chops off her own head and stuff like that, that's fine. But then the scene when he doesn't float, does he? When they go back up into like the little tree house, you've just got everyone sat there. It's quite hot. Like it hits well how you've got all this chanting and it just ends. That works, but like you said, you go from total chaos and it's like almost like relaxed setting. I guess it sort of rounds off the film, but I don't know. I really, yeah, for some reason with the end of this film, I just can't decide on if I enjoy it or not. I think if it was sort of scaled back a little bit, it would still be able to deliver like a similar message as to what it wanted to, scare the audience, but not have people so conflicted. Because I know that is like one issue that people do have with the film is if they like the ending or not. And I think more people sway towards disliking it rather than liking it.
One thing I do like is the use of the like the dollhouse and all the stuff that all the little figurines that she's constructing. Matty touched on it as well. The idea that them not having control over their situation. And I like how the movie opens with the camera like slowly zooming in onto the boys' room, and then it kind of there's a camera technique I heard someone say what it's called. I'm not going to be able to remember it. There's like some techniques where you make real life images look like they're like doll houses or doll figures. There's like a technique for that. But the way they do that with the boys' room kind of shows straight away they're being constructed, they're being controlled by someone or something, and then obviously we later learn it's this cult. Okay, we can get some ratings. Mason?
I think, like I said, because out of the 4 films we've watched this week, this was the first one that I had actually seen in cinema and first, and I felt like it sort of redefined the horror genre at like within that moment of time. So I gave it an 8.6.
Ross?
Yeah, this is probably one of my favorite horror films of all time. It's so well crafted and just excellent watch. I gave it an 8.4.
Matty?
Yeah, really solid film. I thought the horror elements were scared the shit out of me, so I gave it an 8.2.
And I gave it an 8.1. Can we move on now to Ross's pick, Midsommar in 2019, Ari Aster's second film. A couple travels to Sweden to visit a rural hometown's fabled Midsummer festival. What begins as an idyllic retreat quickly devolves into an increasingly violent and bizarre competition at the hands of a pagan cult. It's a detailed synopsis. Starring Florence Pugh, Jack Rayner, Will Poulter, William Jackson Harper, and Wilhelm Blomgren. Ross, why did you pick this film?
This is probably a film where I went to see it and I thought I wouldn't like it, but it's the most surprised I've been to actually really enjoy a film. Like, what Ari Aster is really good at is taking a genre or subgenre that isn't really that popular, but making it accessible to everyone. I think at times might be a bit similar to like The Wicker Man, but in terms of the film, it's just so like well crafted. It's got amazing editing, the cuts, the sound, the cinematography. It's all like immaculate, and aesthetically and visually, this film is absolutely stunning. Yeah, I mean, there's the first bit where, for the first like 20 minutes, it's got her sister and her parents being killed, and it doesn't really become relevant to the rest of the story, and there's not much connection to the narrative with that part. But apart from that, I don't have many problems with the film. Like, Florence Pugh is really, really good in this film. Maybe apart from her like weird sad face she does, but apart from that, she's really good. And then Will Poulter's quite good at providing like a comic relief, and he gets a good mixture of making a weird, scary film and also making it quite funny at the same time. Because for the first hour, it just seems like a bit unusual, nothing too much. But then once there's that bit where the people just start jumping off the cliff and the guy gets like head smashed in, after that, it just becomes like, the level of like weirdness and like creepiness just kind of skyrockets, and you get so many memorable moments in it, like when the guy, her boyfriend gets drugged and he's having sex and they're all making noise at the same time, and that kind of stuff. It makes for a really good, like, really, I was interested throughout the whole film. I wasn't bored at any moment either. Yeah, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I saw a tweet, feels like a week or so ago, and it was like a comfort movie that most people find disturbing. I replied to it eyes wide shut, but watching Midsommar again over the weekend, I think it's like maybe the fourth or fifth time I've seen it. I was like, yeah, this is my weirdly comforting movie. I just really enjoy being in this environment for some reason, whether it's the number of funny moments in a very creepy and at times depressing film, but there's quite a few funny moments. But aside from that, it's just like the production design. Like you can tell they've rocked up to a field. I think like they didn't film this in Sweden. I think they filmed it in like another Nordic country. I can't remember. But they just rocked up to a field and have had to construct this whole like community with these weird buildings and all that stuff. And every time you leave one building, like a character leaves one building and runs across this field, like you have a sense of where you are constantly. It's like, okay, they run out of that barn and they're running into this barn. Like the sense of space, it's like really good in this film. And then the brightness, like I don't think there's ever been a brighter film. I remember I watched it with Mason in cinema when it came out like a year or so ago. And by the end of it, in part due to what was happening on the screen by the end, which was very bewildering and strange, but partly because of how bright it is for 2.5 hours, you're like almost like hallucinating. Like I remember sitting there like, what the fuck is going on? Partly like, why is he in a bear suit? All of this stuff. But in part that was contributed to from having this bright screen in my face for 2.5 hours. I think this is another thing that I found weirdly comforting. Then you have like the dancing as well. Like you can tell they've had to learn like how little tribes like this, how they dance and all their different customs and stuff. So all those little details add to the whole spectacle of this film. And I don't agree with Ross about the suicide. Her parent, well, not the suicide, like the sister's suicide, killing the parents, like not being relevant. I think that's just to show that Danny is in the intense state of grieving, and it's to show how unsupportive her boyfriend is being, which is ultimately what the movie is about. Like Ari Aster, he wrote this after a bad breakup, and I think he's meant to be Florence Pugh's character essentially in this film. Like he's Jack Rainey. He's so good at playing a complete asshole, like throughout. The reluctant look he has on his face. Like the first time you notice, well, obviously they phone each other, and he's like, "Fuck's sake, she's phoning me again." And his friends are telling him to break up with her. He's like, "Oh, I wish I broke up with her a year ago." Da da da. But then it's when after her sister has killed her parents and killed herself, he's walking up to her house. And it's like, "Oh fuck's sake, I've got to go comfort her now, haven't I? Fuck's sake!" Like, so good at playing an arsehole. And other little things as well, like when she's like he doesn't tell her that he's going to Sweden, then she finds out, and he tries to make her feel like guilty and irrational for like questioning him, even though it's like a week away, and he hasn't told her that he's going. And the thing that I find interesting about that is the person who does like support her is Pelle, the Swedish guy who invites them to the place, and him and his people, they're both really supportive of her situation and trying to help her in this moment, which is interesting because ultimately they're still murderers, so they're not great people. But it kind of asks you to think about whether this is a more caring community than communities we have in America, or it could be the UK or whatever. Because like specifically you have Pelle who says that his parents died, and having this support group around him helped him to get through that. So it kind of like, pretty much that underlines the point I think they were trying to make. And then you have that comment as well, which I thought was interesting. Like, yeah, because they have the thing where, you work to a certain age, like you go to school to a certain age, work to a certain age, you get to 72 and then you die. And that's as well when he says that to her, he's like, yeah, when you get to 72, doesn't think much of it. And then obviously that scene happens with the old couple. But I can't remember who makes the comment, but it's like, yeah, we put our elderly in care homes, so what's the difference? Like, at least they've lived a full life, and now they put an end to it. Whereas you leave your some people leave their old people to rot in care homes without any love. So an interesting point. Don't know where to come down on it, whether it's correct or not that this is a more supportive place, because ultimately, yeah, they're still fucking cultish murderers. But very interesting film. A lot to dive into. Mason, what do you... Wait, no, it was Mason's film, wasn't it? Yeah, it was. No, it wasn't. It was Ross's film. Mason, what do you think of it?
Yeah, I rewatched, I think, the first hour of it last night, and then I've seen it this year again since seeing it in the cinema. And every time I watch it, I always forget how obviously like kind of gruesome it is in certain scenes, especially the cliff scene, and then a few of the scenes at the end where like the people are literally like stuffed with like fucking like veg and stuff, like it's a bit collapsed. But I feel like this is a film you can get lost in when, although you don't really want to, because of how like uncomfortable it makes you. For some reason, there's this weird like welcoming presence you get when you watch it, where you're like, you feel like you're there in Sweden enjoying this little like cult festival, and then you get reminded, no, you're actually watching a horror film, and you shouldn't be enjoying this, basically. And I think that's why the film's so strong, because it has this nice blend of like feeling like normal in certain places, and you're experiencing the culture with the main characters, but then you get flipped straight back, and then you experience like the negatives of this culture, and it's just like a straight shock, like sort of to the system each time. I think with regards to like the beginning of the film, at first that made me feel like I was watching Hereditary. Like you get the vibes of Hereditary from that, like by the way it's filmed, what happens, stuff like that. But then I think it really comes into its own as soon as they get to the festival. That's when I feel like Midsommar actually gets its own identity, like as a film. And from that point on, it's just, like you said, it's incredible. Having a horror film just continuously bright in basically every scene was a weird experience. Like, I remember when we watched it at the cinema, you're almost on edge and you just feel uncomfortable because you're like, this should be scary, but why is it so bright? Like, it really like fucks with your brain. And to be fair, I remember when the trailer for this film came out, the hype that I remember like me and you, Leon, had around it, like when it came out, because by this point we'd already seen Hereditary in cinema, and then waiting for this to come out, the trailer every time was just so good, and you was just continuously waiting for it to come out. And when it did come out, I definitely feel like it did deliver. Like I said, yeah, each time I watch it, it doesn't disappoint at all. I think every time I watch it, I feel like I pick up on different things and I can enjoy it from a slightly different perspective. And yeah, I don't know. It's hard to think of how to guess this film up because there's just so many potential things you can say. Yeah, it's a very good film.
I also like the long conversations they have in mirrors. I don't know if if he's trying to say something about their relationship, maybe it's like there's more distance between them or something. But aside from that, like it just looks really cool every time they do it. And another thing that I thought was kind of that it added, like, made the film feel more like natural, was obviously these guys are students and they have this whole like argument about who wants to do their thesis on this place or whatever. But like having them being students, like they're asking questions about the community and the people and stuff. So it makes like the exposition not sound like exposition. Like in the film, if they weren't students who are having to ask these like logical questions, then they would have to just bring up parts of their culture, like, and it wouldn't feel as organic. Now, was that something you thought helped make the film feel more natural? Like they're just asking questions, so because they're asking questions, you're gonna learn more and more about this community.
Yeah, definitely. The whole way the film runs a really natural course, which is really quite interesting. And again, with the mirrors, what you said, that I found it quite nice how the way they would frame scenes so that there was even people standing what felt like behind the camera rather than set up in a nice kind of like a play, made everything feel a whole lot more, I don't know how to describe it, just like it would happen, a lot more realistic. And you know me, I like overarching themes in films, as always. And I was trying to like figure out like if there was like a meaning behind this film, or whether it was literally, or more like a meaning behind the film and then a meaning behind the cult itself, or whether it was just crazy people killing people and justifying it for no reason. And then looking at what the director was saying about it, he described it as an operatic breakup film that may dip into a horror. which is quite interesting because it mainly just follows the two main characters as they go through kind of like a dying romance, which is it's quite sad anyway. Like, I think what this film does well, rather than focusing on the horror, it kind of focuses on inter-character dynamics, which is a lot more interesting usually. Just the way people argue, the way people talk about things, and because all the main characters are completely passive in the film, they're not pursuing anything, they're literally just being led and experience things, and then you're just watching how they react. So it kind of takes away a lot more of the, well, they need to go this, they need to do this, need to go here, they're not doing this, that wouldn't happen. They're being guided at the same speed you are, so you're experiencing things with them, and that way you don't really know what's going to happen because the main characters have no motives other than experience. And it seems as soon as they become active and trying to either, whether it's get away or stop something, then they mysteriously go missing and the film goes back to being passive again, which is quite, I don't know, I haven't really seen too many films that are completely like that. The opening, as Ross said, I think it is very useful. It provides nice contrast between the brightness, because pretty much the opening happens almost all inside or all at night. So that when they go to Sweden, or supposedly Sweden, it is a really huge contrast that she's actually moved on to somewhere that's a bit brighter for her. So that might mislead you. And then the trip comes, which is the only kind of real jump scare in the whole thing that still managed to get me. The woman when she runs into the shed and there's a woman with like her hands over her mouth, that scared the fucking crap out of me. Yeah, I'm not gonna say I enjoyed this. I'm not gonna say like, oh yeah, I really enjoyed the film, it was really good. It was fucking horrible. I had a really bad experience with it. I don't really like it, but I suppose that's what it's meant to do to some people. I just have not got the disposition to watch these kind of films. And also, I think the film, because it's more or less about a breakup, is kind of mimicking. It goes through the mimicking of emotion through empathy, such as like all of her friends and Christian don't have any empathy for what she's going through, and they haven't done for a very long time. And that when she goes to this place, Midsommar, the whole kind of overarching theme of the community is empathy. Like when one of them cries, they all cry and scream together, which is at first it's like really, really strange. But then when you kind of bear that in mind, it makes a bit more sense. Like when the people fell off the cliff and the dude still survived because he landed on his legs because he's an idiot. He's like screaming. And then only then did the entire community all scream. None of them screamed when the first woman down because she died instantly. And then again when they're all having sex. And then again when she's grieving afterwards, when she sees Christian cheating on her. Also, another thing with the film is like the intrigue of gore is quite strong. And then now, as opposed to say 50 years ago when they were doing horror, we can actually replicate more or less anything that would happen with whether CGI or prosthetics or makeup or anything. So the things they do in this film are really quite disgusting, and that they're framed in a way that's so realistic, that they're so teased that you don't see anyone die. You must be in maybe an hour or maybe at least 50 minutes into the film by the time the two man and woman jump off the cliff. And that's done so realistically, you don't want to look away. And most films, you just see them maybe hit the floor from really far away, and then they cut away, and that's all you would get. And that would leave you wanting more. This film literally gets right up in the face of what's happening. And that can be quite strong. The same with like when they took the lungs out of, I don't know which character it was, I couldn't quite see the face. They took the lungs out of one of the people that were trying to escape, but kept them alive. And it's just completely rank the way they do it. But then it's also like you can't really help look away, and there's such an awe that it would be so easy to then put a jump scare in there. And they put a slight one, I think, where he just turned around and someone blew stuff in his face, and that's all they needed. That you were just so on edge just by this. The acting by Christian was really good. I think right at the end as well, when he's in the bear and he's having some mad trip because he's on drugs and he's paralyzed, and his expression is probably like exactly the same as everyone watching the film at that point. Like he's just so confused and just not really sure what the hell's going on. Will Poulter as well, I really enjoy him in films. He always plays kind of like almost a dickhead, but yeah, probably a dickhead. It's really hard to say. And I just like watching him in films because he just adds another dynamic to the group that's a bit more forward and a bit more kind of intrusive. So there's just more arguments, and I think arguments in films are really good. And then the other thing that you're talking about, daytime, usually daytime aren't associated with horrors, which is interesting because people feel safe in the daytime. And the fact that they had a horror that's completely all in the daylight, and almost most of the bad stuff happens in the daylight or the early hours of the morning, well, kind of makes me feel less safe now at all times of the day, which is excellent. And then the last thing I want to talk about is whether the cult was justified. Because when they looked at the suicides and they say, well, hang on a minute, when Christian says, well, they think we're barbaric for putting them in nursing homes, just letting them die. They said, letting them go out at a time that they choose, blah, blah, blah. And the woman argues, saying, well, I would be proud when it's my time to go. And you think, okay, right, maybe it's very, very kind of like on the nose, but maybe we can get over that. And then everything bad that happens after that, we're not explained the meaning to it. But we think maybe there is that kind of meaning like, there's a justification for it. And then when they got to the end and they just burned 9 people alive, I thought, yeah, nah. Because I was still up to that point looking for that justification. I thought, no, they're crazy. They're batshit. They just try and justify it, but they just want to like eat people probably.
I thought they could have turned back Will Poulter's arseholeness just a tiny bit. That was kind of the point. Like these like bombastic Americans coming into their country and behaving belligerently, disrespectfully, kind of thing. That was kind of the point of their characters. But when he pisses on the ancestral tree, and even after he's told, bro, you just pissed on the ancestral tree, he's still like, what? It's a tree. I need to piss. Like, and I feel like a normal person would be like, oh shit, oh sorry. I know it's okay. I respect your customs. But yeah, I thought that. Aside from that, I thought that was one of many funny moments in the film. That the sex scene with Christian and the girl that chooses him. You've been approved to mate with whatever her name is. So you love that when the old lady puts her hands on his arse cheeks and starts pushing. There's so many moments that are genuinely funny in this otherwise creepy film. Ross, is that something you found? There's a lot of comedic elements to the film.
Yeah. I've written, like, as you mentioned, Will Poulter's character really gives that kind of comic relief, and with the ancestral tree and stuff. And I don't know if, like, as you say, the bit with the sex where she's like pushing his arse cheeks and stuff, I don't know if it's meant to be funny or if it is, but I think it is, and it's just weird, and it's just something like they would see as normal, but we wouldn't, which is why it's so weird, and then why we find it funny. But yeah, it's a really nice kind of mixture to it, because with obviously Ari Aster's other film, what's it called, Hereditary, it's not kind of, it's got no comedy in it at all, so it's really nice for him to show that he can do this as well in his writing, and kind of make it, as I say, there's a lot of, Midsommar's very similar to a lot of other kind of folk horror films, and very similar to like The Wicker Man. And I'm pretty sure there's actually another film called Midsommar where teenagers go to the Midsommar festival, whatever. But what they've done with this one is made it really accessible to a wider audience. And I think that's done through the comic relief, so it works really well.
Okay, we can get some ratings. Start with Ross.
I really enjoyed the film. I gave it an 8.2.
Matty.
I gave the film an 8.
Mason.
Yeah, I think the experience I had in the cinema, and compared to how when I watch it at home, it's just exactly the same every time. I gave it an 8.5.
And I gave it an 8.4. The most atrociously disturbing imagery I've ever seen on film. That was a quote about Midsommar from Jordan Peele, who's the writer-director of our next 2 films, starting with his first feature film, Get Out, from 2017. A young African-American visits his white girlfriend's parents for the weekend, where a simmering uneasiness about their reception of him eventually reaches a boiling point. Starring Daniel Kaluuya, Alison Williams, Bradley Whitford, and Catherine Keener. Nominated for Best Picture, Best Actor for Kaluuya, Best Director for Peele, only the 5th black man to be nominated for Best Director, and he won for Best Original Screenplay. And this was Matty's pick. Matty, why'd you pick this film?
Well, I mean, if I could vote for this film 3 times, I would have. I really enjoyed this film. And then again, watching it for the second time, because I've only watched it twice, the other time being today. it was actually a really refreshing rewatch, because once you know the mechanism of why everyone acts the way they do, you can then really start to pick apart the small motives behind what they're saying. So the first time you watch it, all the characters are acting extremely strange. Take like the dinner party example. Everyone seems to be sizing up Chris for no reason, and you're really trying to figure out why. And then even if you don't get it by the time they're doing the auction, you're still really confused as to why they're acting like that way. So that when you know what's happening and then you watch it again, you can really break down even the caretaker and the housemaid behind their little emotional. When she starts to cry, she looks really sad and then seems to regain control, because that was the original person trying to break out of that body, and then the grandmother takes back over. Then you can actually see all of that happening. The first time around, that's kind of lost, and you're left to try and piece it together. So watching it the second time, I actually really enjoyed it, possibly even more than the first time. There are a few things I really liked about the film. Caleb Jones, he's from 3 Billboards. I really do like him in films. I wish he had a bit more to do in this film, because he just played it so well. He's such a convincing actor, and quite an unorthodox actor, because he usually plays characters that are slightly further afield or a bit weird and unconventional, which I really like. One of my favorite scenes was the keys, where the keys rose. And when she finally, her whole composure just changes, and she just drops the facade, holds up the keys, and they're here. And that's where Daniel just drops the bag, and he just knows like he's fucked it, and it's just all going to go south from there. And that realization when she goes, I can't give you the keys, that's probably one of the most powerful, because any kind of last hope that at least Rose might not be in on this is then just gone. And also when the Rose is acting differently after that, then when she rings up his mate, what's his mate called? Little Ray Howry or something. He's the comic relief dude. When she rings him up, and on the phone, if you close your eyes, you can literally just hear the emotion coming through her voice. But as you're watching it, her face is completely deadpan, and she dresses completely different. She ties her hair back, and she's a completely different person. And that's really quite unsettling for the whole of the rest of the film, and it kind of takes it away, because the person that she was is just completely fake, and you actually want her to die, and you feel good when she gets shot in the stomach by her own granddad. But maybe that's just me. What else are we going to talk about? Mate, the first half of the film is so tense in terms of, because racism is brought up straight away within like the first 5 minutes, whether it be a problem or whether it wouldn't be a problem. So you're instantly sizing up the parents and the brother, trying to see what they're talking about, to see whether they are going to act in this way. And they're making such a point of not being racist, and then bringing up everything about race to show that they're not, that it just conversely just becomes completely racist, because all they're talking about is race to him. The only like parts of his identity that they care about are his race. Not one point does anyone talk about his photography or any other interest that he has. Only one character, what was his name? The dude that wanted his eyes, Stephen Root, his character, he didn't care about the race or anything. He just wanted to be able to see again. And that is the only genuine conversation he has from anyone connected to the family or within the family in the entire film. And he actually speaks to him like a person, rather than asking him, because every single conversation he has with every other family member or relative to the family or friend of the family is just concerning his race. What is his experience as an African American? Is it truly better this, or is it that? Everything's just geared in that way that that's all he ever talks about. You can see it just makes him extremely uncomfortable. And as well, the dude from, don't tell me, he's in Knives Out. What's his name? And sorry to bother you. Someone give me a name, please.
Keith Stanfield.
Yeah, sure. He's really good in this film as well. And to be fair, he gets a very, very small amount of time. I wouldn't be surprised if it was nearly 6 minutes of screen time. And he worked excellently. As well as we're trying to figure out what he's going through the first time we watch it. We're unsure the way he's acting. And then when we understand what's happening, we see it is perfect. It is spot on. And the alternative ending, I'm really glad they went with this ending, the way that he literally just gets off with it and he manages to get home and it's a happy ending, more or less. I mean, a few people have died, and it's not so happy for the people who never managed to escape the sunken place. But it's a shame that it also highlights what probably would actually happen if a cop turned up to that scene. He would go to prison. And without it being so on the nose, the happy ending highlights what would actually happen. And then it's like another kind of poke towards the area of like the system's not particularly fair. And I think this is probably the most dense. I don't watch many horror films, but I can imagine it is the most dense and highly messaged horror film out there. That's probably aside from Us. There's just so much going into this film, and it's so purposeful, and I really enjoyed it. I didn't find it too scary, which is lucky because I did really enjoy this film. And I wouldn't want to have missed out on it because of that.
This film is all about these regular middle-class white people, and that's kind of like where the horror comes in, because they're like the benevolent racists. Like Matt's talk about, like the language they use, the comments they make, where they're trying not to be racist, like the thing about I'd vote for Obama a third time or whatever if I could, all that kind of stuff. Like they're perfectly fine people, but they still subtly view black people as lesser than themselves. And ultimately they're not as bombastic in their racism, but they still won't dismantle the system that has black people at the bottom and white people on top. So it's all part of this like white power structure, and they're happy for black people to serve like a function within that. And yeah, the thing with the sunken place, like I think that's just so like visually that just looks really cool. Like having him falling down, almost it looks like it's in like space or something, and then like a white woman's face, like a TV kind of thing on top. Like it looks really good visually. And like Jordan Peele, when you like him, I heard him like describing like coming up with the idea of the sunken place, and that's really interesting if you'll see that out. But just that idea, like the powerlessness that black people have within like the system at the moment, and in the US system primarily, but globally in a sense as well. That's just a really good way to kind of visualize that. And then other details as well, like the police unwilling to help find the missing black guy. Like when Ron, his like best friend, goes to the police to try convince them, yeah, we need to go try find him. He tells them about Lakeith Stanfield. I can't remember Lakeith Stanfield's character's name. Like he went missing X amount of months ago, and now he's rocked up, and they don't really take it seriously. And I like they pointedly use a black female police officer to be the one who kind of dismisses him and takes the piss, to show like it's not like individuals that are racist that are particularly the problem. It's just like the institution is racist. So even though it's a black woman sat there, she represents the police who wouldn't take this seriously when it's a black person gone missing in these circumstances. And one of the best horror openings, I think, of all time, up there with like Scream, that you have Lakeith Stanfield kind of like the way he's like mumbling to himself as the car like comes towards him. He's like, okay, no, I don't need this, gonna turn around. That little touch, and the way the camera's pivoting so you can't see the car's not in shot, and the camera spins, then you see, oh shit, the car stopped, the door's open, spins again, oh fuck, the guy's here, smashed him over the head and he's been kidnapped. So just another element of a really, really strong film. Ross, how did you enjoy this rewatch?
Yeah, I think you notice a lot of details early on, like especially when he first goes to the house when you rewatch it. Like the dad says stuff like saying about there being black mold in the basement, and like the mum, she starts like tapping the glass quite early on as well, and you know it's just little things like that which make the film I don't think the first time I watched it I realized how like detailed it was in that sense, but when you watch it a second time you really realize just the little details. And it's so interesting watching on the rewatch, like him at the auction and stuff, and how these how the white people are like weighing him up and like kind of analyzing him and seeing if they want him or not. And it gives you a whole new perspective, say on like the blind guy talking to him, being interested in his photography and stuff. It gives you a whole new perspective on that kind of thing. And it's just it's the rewatch I think I actually enjoyed better than the first watch, just because of those details I could pick up on and realize how detailed it really was. And like when he goes upstairs and then they all just stop speaking and start start doing the auction later on and that kind of stuff, it makes it a really, really interesting watch. And as you said about picking the cotton and that kind of stuff, you can see how much detail Jordan Peele has put into this film. And I said the same with Ari Aster, and I'll say it the same with Jordan Peele. You would think this was made by an experienced filmmaker, an experienced director, and along with the great performance from Daniel Kaluuya, it just all works so well.
I like how it gets across, how why people can be kind of titillated by the black specimen, for whatever better word, and black culture. Like one of the guys at the party, he's like, yeah, it's in fashion to be black at this point. It really captures that very subtly in kind of unintentionally racist language that these type of people, middle class liberal people, tend to use. And Matty mentioned it as well, the faith he has in his girlfriend Rose, and the film takes great pains to make her seem genuine, and that's crucial to the whole. Obviously now watching it multiple times, you obviously know that she's not siding with him, but watching the first time and the way the movie presents it, she feels so genuine. He confides in her throughout. You feel she's an ally to him. Mason, is that something that you thought was crucial to the film working?
Yeah, like you said, when you watch it for the first time, the way they present Rose just works so well, because she always challenges certain things that are put towards Daniel Kaluuya's character, when he gets pulled over by the police. She's very supportive, and immediately she's sort of presented her family are a bit weird, and that she's she kind of escaped that, and then she's got to go and visit and to say hello. She seems almost disconnected from her family in that sense, and that's why you believe that she is probably the only normal person there. And then when you have that all add up, and she's continuously supporting him and stuff like that, you have those two scenes where he finds out all the photos, doesn't he, of her dating other black people and stuff like that. And then you also have the whole key scene, and that, like you said, it just works so well, because that was such a massive twist the first time you watch it, because you're she is his last hope. She'll be the only reason he gets out of this house alive right now. Her family have just gone fucking crazy. And then she's no, I can't give you these keys. And as soon as that bit happens, you're oh fuck. I felt as much as Daniel Kaluuya's character had been played, I felt I had been played equally as much at that point in the film. I was oh, she's just done me dirty. I believe this woman for an hour and 20 minutes, and she's just fucked me right over. So I think that's just a credit to sort of the writing and stuff like that, because for that to be such an effective twist and for it to hit so well, yeah, it's literally just down to the writing. And even when you rewatch it, it doesn't really detract from that. You can still have that belief in her character, and yeah, it works very well. That's a very key strong point of the film.
Another thing just occurred to me as well, because when the dad talks about the deer, when they first get to the house, he talks about the deer and he just wants to take them out. Once one is gone, the world's a better place kind of thing. He mentions that when they first get to the house, and obviously then you get the deer head in the basement later on. And then I only just thought because you have, when they hit the deer, when they're driving up there, and when they hit the deer, the girlfriend, she's kind of startled, but not as much as Chris is. And then Chris is the one who goes into the woods to try to inspect the deer, to show that adds another layer to that idea that the deer, in the dad's eye, the deer, black people are just like deer. They're there to be wiped out. They're there to be got at. And then you have Chris caring for the deer when they hit it at the start. So just more detail that Peele puts in, which just makes him such a great writer, such a great director. And Matty as well touched about Rose after she's revealed to be with the family and not with Chris, and the way she changes her appearance. I like as well in that scene where she's eating the cereal's in a bowl, and then the milk's in a separate cup. And it's just a really, I don't know if people do that. It's a weird arrangement. And she's eating, I thought they were just Cheerios, and I looked up what they were. They're called Fruit Loops, if it's an American thing. And Fruit Loops is another word for crazy. But there's another little detail in there. Matty?
I heard some interesting, what's it called? imagery that they were not imagery, a metaphor they were also using the deer for early on. That the only reason he was so startled by the deer is when he was watching it, he was watching that, basically watching his mother die again, not doing anything, and watching that person die. And then at the end, when he's using the deer to kill the dad, it was then him getting over the fact that he did nothing and now he's taking control again, as well as also kind of like going against the using of like trophyism for this. There's something else I was going to say. Oh, and the use of the weapons that he always uses in his films. We'll talk about it in Us later on. But like the use of the like the ball, the game you roll it, and you have to get closest to the white one. It's like the most typically white privileged kind of like upper class thing, like most Caucasian thing you could have, and he uses it as a weapon to kill the son. Just more like like everything he uses in all of his films, like even the lacrosse stick that the son uses. Like everything is just so specifically chosen that it just works. It's just so much attention to detail in the films that it can't not pay off at some point.
That's so smart. The thing with the deer linking to his mother. That's just so smart. It's actually just mad that this guy came from Key and Peele doing their sketches and stuff. And this genius work. And going back to what Matty talked about initially, like about the ending that he was going to go for. Like he said, so he was going to have him being around. I watched that scene. It's on YouTube. And like he obviously was going to have the police arrest him. And he was just kind of going to accept it. And like the line he says in that clip is, at least I stopped them. Like, he's not prepared to fight for his innocence anymore. It's like, at least I stopped them on this occasion. And Peele said, like, he thought that was the appropriate ending at first to prompt like more conversation about like the issues that Black people face in America with the police and things like that. But then after like the country became more, or like society became more woke, which is what he said, like it made more sense to have a happy ending. And just having the police lights on Rod's car, that was like enough of a shock for the audience. Like, oh my days, he's gonna like, because then instantly you're thinking, oh, he's a black guy. There's no way they're gonna believe him. He's gonna go to prison just by seeing the lights. So, and he thought that was effective enough. And because people are having more, by the time this was released, people were having more conversations about race that you didn't need to like drive it home with him actually being arrested and having that depressing ending. Mason, have you got any thoughts on that choice?
Yeah, like I think you just said, I think it's definitely the right choice to make to not include that scene, because if society itself has started to evolve, even just the slightest bit where conversation is more apparent, to have that scene is a bit too much, like almost in your face, to where just having the lights alone will have the same effect. And yeah, like you said, it feels more progressive to have just sort of the subtlety of it instead. And yeah, I prefer the ending we were given instead of the proposed one.
I think, yeah, the fact that as soon as you see the police car, like you said, I think every person in the audience just assumed, oh yeah, he's done now. Like he's ruined. Like my mum was walking in and out while I was watching this film and saw the cop car pulled up and goes, she went, oh, black man in America, he's ruined now. He's done. And I was like, Mum, yeah, well, you're not wrong, to be fair. Like, and then the fact that when you go, oh, it's his mate, he gets out of the car, the whole audience goes, well, that would never happen. And they've already made the assumption, so they've recognized that there is that problem straight away. He's made his point just by teasing the audience. And I think by going with the alternative ending, it might then have lost its kind of clarity. So yeah, that works really well.
So obviously this film is like packed with meaning, packed with detail, like really well done. But in terms of just purely what literally happens with his like escape, do you think that could have been done better? Like it felt like it was a bit easy for him to escape when he's finally put into that room. Like, yeah, I don't know. The escape just wasn't as well crafted as everything else in the film. Ross, is that something you thought watching it?
Yeah, he does escape pretty easy. It happens so quite quickly as well, and like, yeah, he kills the brother. Obviously, well, you think he's dead, but then it's kind of, I think him killing the dad is quite underwhelming. I mean, it's good symbolism with the deer, but it just happens so quick. You're like, oh shit. Then goes upstairs and what's it? The mum with the cup. That is over with in like a minute as well, and it all happens so quickly. And you're like, well, so he's just escaped now. And yeah, I mean, the way he stops the mum is just by smashing the cup. And yeah, it all happens so quickly. But I'll say, Yeah, so he could have escaped. Could have taken a bit longer with his escape. But I'll say one problem I have with the film is the brother. I just find him so irritating. I think he's a terrible actor as well, and his presence just like irritates me, but not in a good way. So obviously, it was really satisfying when he died in the end. But yeah, so that's one of the issues I do have with the film. But no, another issue is kind of how quickly he escapes, and it's kind of underwhelming in the end, I think. But it kind of saves it with that ending with the police lights.
Yeah, it was kind of like when the dad had to tell him to kind of settle down, let someone else have the floor. You felt that then the tension was focused on, oh, maybe it's just the brother that's a bit of a bad egg, and the rest of the family are trying to be more inclusive. But then that just might have just been some nice kind of misdirection.
Okay, we can get some ratings. Start with you, Matty.
I gave it an 8.5.
Mason.
Yeah, I enjoy it, but I think after rewatching it for like the third or fourth time, I've started to lose interest slightly with it. So I gave it an 8.
Ross.
Yeah, I mean it's a good film, but I think compared to some of the other horror films, I maybe didn't enjoy it as much, so I gave it an 8.1.
And like Matty, I gave it an 8.5. And final film, Jordan Peele's second film, Us, from 2019, my pick. A family's serene beach vacation turns to chaos when their doppelgangers appear and begin to terrorize them. Starring Lupita Nyong'o, Winston Duke, Elizabeth Moss, Tim Heidecker, Shahadi Wright-Joseph, and Evan Alex. No Oscar love for this film. Yeah, I really love this film. I watched it twice in the super screen in Leicester Square, and that added the intensity of the sound, and I loved the score for this film. Like that added to the experience, seeing it in such a kind of deluxe screen. And aside from the symbolism and everything else and the message behind everything that's going on, just purely like the idea that you've confronted with yourself, someone who looks exactly like you, that fear is something that feels kind of real to me. And it's essentially it's like being faced with like the worst parts of yourself in a human form and having to overcome that. So that was when I saw the trailer, that was like, okay, I'm in. This is going to be creepy on some level. I think this was like a film where they surprised people in a sense, because Get Out was like definitively from the first, after the first scene, the first scene with Daniel Kaluuya, that was like, okay, this is definitively about race. He's like, yeah, do your parents know that I'm black? You know what the themes are going to be from the outset in that film. Whereas this one is like more broad, more ambitious. This is kind of like, yeah, he's been massively successful with his first film. Now he's going to really go for it with this one. And I like that because people just assumed this would be about race. He like subverts expectations by casting a black family still, but it's not really about race. And this black family is like middle class as well, like rich enough to have like a summer home kind of thing. It's not something you usually see in film, which was cool. And kind of moving on to what the film is actually like saying, like, which is why the twist at the end is essential for me. I've heard people say like they don't really understand what the point of it was, but I thought like the point was like it's whatever you're able to like achieve in life is as a result of your circumstances. So it doesn't matter who was in the underground or who was above ground. The fact that they switched, and so even though she was underground initially, but as soon as she gets to live overground, she's able to forge a successful life for herself. So it's like anyone can prosper given the right circumstances. And like the whole main point of the film is as well is like, while one prospers, the other one suffers, which is the point of like the overground, the underground thing. Like that duality is that's what you see throughout the film. And I liked how it showed how you can get like complacent as well in that sense. Like this middle class black family and the white family as well, Elizabeth Moss and Tim Heidecker's family. Like you see them like chatting shit, like rivaling to see who's got the biggest boat, and they're having conversations like that, and they're always like competing with each other for like superficial like bullshit. And whilst you're doing that, it's easy to forget that you've got families metaphorically eating rabbits underground. There's like duality, forgetting that people, whilst you're succeeding, whilst you're living your best life, like there's other people at the bottom. And again, we talked about the detail that he puts into Get Out. This one as well, it's just another, like, I don't know if he's going to keep doing this for every film, because there's so much work that must go into doing this, but like the constant like doubling and like the symmetry that you get in this film. Like you have like their shadows when they first go to the beach, you have a shot of like their shadows overhead. You have like the family sticker of like their family on the back of the car. You have twins in the White family as well, and it's just constant throughout the film. So much detail packed into it. And I think the reason it wasn't received as well, at least by like audiences, like it's only got a 6.9 on IMDb and it's 59% Rotten Tomatoes, the audience score. And I think it's because like the actual like mechanics of what's happening in this film in like a literal way. So obviously the metaphor is the metaphor, and that's really smart and it's got something interesting to say about like class division and stuff. But the actual metaphor of them living underground, does it really make sense? Like someone said, like, well, if they go abroad, if they go abroad, the people living overground, what happens to the people living in these tunnels under America underground? So like things like that, the actual mechanics of their situation, like, and like why they're eating rabbits, and all these little holes that people would like to poke. I think that's why it wasn't as, people who don't like it as much as Get Out, because it's a bit more like broad and it's not as clear. Like Get Out was clear, this is what's going on. There's not many holes to poke. And I think the only problem I have with that, like, I'm not really bothered about that stuff. I'm okay with just being like, it doesn't matter if the film's not all there with the plot, the messages that it's trying to convey, and the sound, and the way it's shot, and the acting. The acting's incredible. Lupita, could talk about her later on. All those factors contributed to being such a great film for me that I'm not too concerned with the mechanics of the plot. But the only problem is you have that scene with Red, who's the like underground version of Lupita. Like she delivers like a big like exposition dump about why they're there. Like the government created us or something like that. They kind of, it's like very vague and not clear. I think if they just didn't have that scene, like if you just don't try to explain it, it's similar to like Hereditary. Like you don't need to tell me why. You don't need to tell me that it's a cult that's causing all these weird things that are happening. It doesn't need to be explained. You can just leave that open. But having her deliver this like exposition dump, that creates more holes in itself. Because like, what, the government created them? Why did they create them? Or they've just left them there? All that kind of stuff. That's the only thing that I think didn't work about the film, and why the like general audiences didn't really respond to it. Mason, what was your reaction to the film? Are you in the side, more my side, or are you more the general audience side?
Yeah, it's really jarring because now you've said that, I never really like considered how sort of problematic the whole setup of the tethered underground is. Like, Alicia, you said about them going on holiday, because like you said, when Lupita delivers that whole speech about why they're made, it suggests it's just an American thing. So like you said, if they go abroad, there's not going to be a tunnel system that goes to every country to allow the tether to live this life. Like, yeah, I don't know. When you like delve into it, it's annoying because it feels like it should detract from it. And I remember, I think I've seen the film twice now, and that is part of the film that does stick out when she tries to explain it, because you try to understand it, but then you're just like, oh, whatever, it doesn't matter, I don't really care. And like I said, if it wasn't in there at all, leaving it up to that speculation, I think would have been a bit more effective. But I think I'm definitely more on your side when it comes to letting that affect the film, because both times I've watched it, although like you said, for the plot that should be a major like part, it isn't for me as a viewer. Like I don't care. I'm more interested in this journey that Lupita and her family going on, along with the whole messages, like you said, is trying to convey. And because it does that so well, mixed in with such like great cinematography, everything like that, you're able to kind of forgive that the vagueness of the origin of these people. And yeah, I think, like I said, it should be a lot more like key and a big issue that should detract me from the film. But because it does everything else so well, it's so easy to just ignore it. And yeah, even though you've said that, I know that when I next watch it, that won't be an issue. I won't be like looking out to be like, oh, for fuck's sake, it's pissed me off. Like, it ruins the whole film. It's just, yeah, it's definitely forgettable. So I'd say I'm definitely more on your side in that argument.
I really like the scene where, so Elizabeth Moss and Tim Heidecker, their family, when they're murdered by their doppelgangers, that's really effective, because up until that point, Like you did it because it wasn't hinted at in the trailer. You didn't know whether this was like a national thing that was happening. Like everyone's doppelgangers were coming from above to come murder them. So you thought it might have just been like exclusive to the Lapita's family. So they've got away from their doppelgangers now, so they're going to go to their friend's house and they'll be sweet and they can try tackle this issue from there, try to get some weapons or something, which could turn into like a slasher film at that point. Like you've just got to try to figure out a way to kill your own doppelgangers. But in that moment where that whole scene is just done really well, because another thing that shows is how much hatred they have for each other. Like these bougie, like middle class people, but there's no love in that marriage. They just fucking hate each other. They're just going through the motions kind of thing. They've got 2 daughters. It's a bit long getting a divorce. Might as well just stick it out. They've got like a really funny version of Alexa. I think it's called Ophelia. Is that like showing how where modern technology is at this point? And then so they're just bickering about something. She says, "Look outside. There's something outside. I'm scared." Then the doppelgangers come and take them out. Then you have Good Vibrations playing. And then the thing with "fuck the police." Like everything about that scene was just well done. But Matty, was that kind of a key point in the film for you, where it's like, oh my days, okay, so everyone's doppelgangers are kind of come for them. It's not just with Lupita's family.
Yeah, that's the point when you realize it's a bit more feasible that no police are turning up, and it's a really systemic kind of problem. And it's about that halfway through the film that it becomes much less a horror than a thriller for me, which I quite enjoyed, because the threat becomes so much more tangible, so much more dealable. You can fight these things, kind of thing. That's where it becomes like more of a survival kind of. You need to work to survive, to like beat these things if you can, and get away and see how far kind of the rabbit hole goes. So that's when I much prefer horror films that are not really horror films. Like supernatural stuff is always much more scarier than when it's explained. Like films like The Boy, when they explain it's just some dude living in the walls controlling everything. Oh, okay, that's not that scary, kind of thing. I think my favorite film or favorite example of this is Knowing, with Nick Cage. Yes, this is a really funny film in that the trailer is absolutely excellent, and it's a really kind of like horrifying supernatural thing that you have no idea what the explanation could be, and then when it does get explained, it just ruins the whole film, kind of thing. And that kind of little intrigue of mystery is what's quite powerful. And I think, as you said with this film, the fact that they tried to put such a definitive, like, yeah, this is actually a thing, this is how it works, these are all the tunnels. And at the start of the film, it says there are thousands and thousands of miles of metros, mine shafts, and all this that is abandoned, unused. And they're trying to lay the plausibility in early on, because you know if you get thrown with that information at the end, you're just not going to take it very well. So that's where the film does fall a little bit short. If they just left the mystery of it, it might have done a bit better, because like it doesn't take long to think about the logistics, how it just doesn't really work, and the fact that the government are doing things, and it's not as strong as Get Out. Get Out kind of works because it's very small and localized, and also I don't really understand the Hands Across America kind of thing. They took that to be like a revolutionary movement or something. I just didn't really quite grasp the idea of it. I did enjoy the comedy though of the film. Like the dad was probably my favorite. When he goes outside to tell the family to like go away, and he goes out like 3 times, like I think, or maybe 2 times. I think the first time he goes out, kind of like, because he's like they're a black family, but they're kind of well-to-do, so they're kind of talking very kind of upper class, just polite, courteous, kind of, oh yeah, just move along, you know, we don't want any trouble. And then he kind of then has to like code switch a little bit when he comes out the second time. He comes out with a baseball bat and he's like trying to like, I don't know, read a bit of that kind of like the rap culture that he was like ignoring to his son, in terms of like the 5 on It song. Is the son saying, is it about drugs? No, it's just about vibing, kind of thing. Kind of like dismissing that part of the culture when he wants to, and then when it comes to turning people off his driveway, then he taps into it again, not very well, because he gets his ass handed to him. So that was just quite interesting, the way he trying to like change like who he was representing himself to be in terms of the situation. What else are we looking at? The murder weapons as well we can talk about now, in terms of the typically white sports, in terms of like the golf club and the baseball bat that they were using, kind of mimics what Peele's done in Get Out again, in terms of the bowls ball and the lacrosse stick.
Yeah, I don't really know what the Hands Across America thing means. Like, I looked into what Hands Across America was, and like, essentially it was kind of like not really. It never really had the impact they wanted it to have. It was kind of like a futile, like, gesture. It didn't really raise much money. Like, a lot of the money they did raise didn't actually end up going to poorer people. So it's kind of like a failed movement. So I don't know, is that suggesting, like, I don't know, like, you can do these bold gestures to try reduce class divides, but they're all just not really going to have an impact, or at least they haven't had an impact in the past. So this is always going to exist. I don't really know. Matt, you got any thoughts on that?
I think the example they were trying to make was that upper class kind of families can just, donate their $10 for a month and do a little stunt and hold hands, and then that would kind of like solve all the problems of society. In that case, it was kind of like world hunger, whatever it was, and then whatever problems Peele was trying to highlight. The fact that that's not enough, but that's all that the upper class needed to think they needed to do.
I want to talk about the acting in this film, because I think they're strong performances all around, particularly from the main family, and like the daughter, her doppelganger performance, really menacing for someone. I think she's only like 13, 14. She was in the new Lion King last year, but she's so menacing. That face she pulls, like, really pretty terrifying. And Matty touched on, what's his name, Winston Duke, or aka M'Baku. Like, his kind of comic relief that he brings to the role is really crucial. Like, when they first turn up outside the house and he comes out, he's like, oh, if you want to get crazy, we can get crazy. Like, little things like that. It's just perfect. He's so, like, corny. And yeah, Matty touched on that, like, the idea that he's into like rap culture and black things like that, but he's just so, it's a point made to make him so corny, such a corny dad. So I thought that was pretty funny. But yeah, the main one is obviously Lupita Nyong'o. Like, I think that is one of the biggest Oscar snubs of all time, in my opinion. Like, this is just like a colossal performance in both roles. Like, the subtle things she has to do. Like, obviously you have the moments, like the clues that they switch round, because like the Adelaide, so the Lupita on top of the ground, her, every now and then she has these like feral moments. Like, you see it when she murders one of the white twins. You see it like later on, like when eventually murders Red, and then just little times where she can't, when she says it on the beach to Elizabeth Moss, she's like, yeah, I have trouble speaking sometimes, things like that, because obviously she didn't speak properly. She spoke in broken speech when she was underground, so she had to learn how to speak more when she got above ground. And it touches like that. And sometimes she's just like staring into space because she's just not completely with it because of where she came from. And then obviously her as Red is just like one of the most terrifying characters I think like ever put to screen. Like, everything she's able to do with her voice, the way she like moves her neck, the way she walks, like watching that first scene when they break into the house and they sit down, like watching that for the first time, that was like, I was on the edge of my seat. That's one of my favorite like experiences in the cinema, watching a scene. It's like, oh my days, what is this? How is she pulling this off right now? Like, she's doing a completely different performance, sat in the chair a few feet away, and here she is in this red jumpsuit with a glove on, holding a pair of scissors, doing this like terrifying role. So I thought she was just incredible. I don't know how she wasn't nominated, especially when Jordan Peele had such like success with the Academy, with Get Out. Like, for this film to not get any recognition, like, even if it was just her performance, like, I think it's a travesty. Mason, is that something you felt about her performance in this film?
Yeah, I mean, watching it back like a few days ago, you really like appreciate how incredible her acting is in this film. Like, in any film anyway, when an actor has to play two characters at once, it's normally enjoyable to watch, and it's really sort of well done. But her performance in this just takes it to another level. Like you said, she's playing two totally contrasting characters, but then she's able to show this emotion on both sides as to why one has such resentment for the other. And then she also develops like the Red character so well, and you truly believe that she would have been like a normal human who has now had to live in this sort of tethered world, like underground, for years. And I think she literally has like hit the nail on the head and created this character who is exactly how anyone would be if they found themselves like in that situation. But yeah, definitely, I think watching it back, I really appreciated her acting this time around, and to not get nominated like is so peak anyway. But she could have easily won this award if she was actually nominated for it. So like you said, to get absolutely no recognition from the Academy, it genuinely makes no sense. And like you said, it's a massive snub. It reminds me of the lead from Hereditary not getting nominated. But I think this one sort of hits just a bit more because she delivers such like a unique experience that deserves at least recognition, let alone the award itself.
And they'd given her an Oscar before as well, so you think they'd be even more inclined to go back there. And it's mad as well, this is her first ever leading role, which is bad considering she does have that Oscar, and she's been in a few other decent films, in the Star Wars films as well, in a small role. But this is her first leading role, and she delivers a performance like this.
Yeah, what you're saying about the acting, I think it's not often you get a kid's performance who actually works really well, but both the kids in this, how they managed to pull off a performance with their normal character and their tethered character works so well. And I think Jordan Peele did a really good job, obviously going kind of back to his comedy roots with this. And there's so many comedic moments that actually work. Like what I found really funny is when Winston Duke's on the boat with his tethered character, and then there's like an animal across the lake that shouts, and he's just like back across the lake. It's so funny. And then yeah, and like what you said about her, Elizabeth Moss being in the house being like, call the police, and it just starts playing NWA. There's moments like that, it just works so well. And this is the third time I've watched it, and this time I was looking out for the Jeremiah 11:11 thing, and that's like dotted throughout the whole film. I looked up the meaning of it, and it pretty much means all like evil to be brought upon earth, and you're all fucked, kind of thing. That's basically what it means, and it's obviously the fact that it represents the two 11s kind of being side by side, like that and the tethered, and it's actually throughout the whole film the kind of detail it puts in that sense works. And the fact that they're in kind of an underground system thing, whatever you want to call it, is actually based off there's abandoned military bases all across America, like a tunnel system. So it kind of makes more sense when you put it in that sense. But I think what you're saying about earlier, whether that works or not, I try to ignore it, and I try to like kind of just enjoy it for what it is and think, okay, then it's all across America then. Like, but I can't help but just like think how unrealistic that would be, and that no one would have found that before. And that's all. Like, it's kind of hard to ignore that, but I try to. But yeah, and this film as well, just kind of probably one of the best soundtracks, especially for a horror film. But yeah, I've really enjoyed it.
Okay, we can get our ratings then. I'll start. I gave this an 8.4. Ross?
I gave it an 8.3.
Matty?
I gave it an 8.3 also.
Mason?
Yeah, I gave it an 8.4.
So in terms of where we rank the films based on our average ratings, we've got Us at number 1 for 8.4, then all level in 8.3, going down Hereditary, Get Out, and then Midsommar. And bizarrely, they all fit together in our overall rankings as well, because we've got Us at number 10, Hereditary 11, Get Out 12, Midsommar 13. Strange times. Okay, moving on to our actor of the week. It's a pretty obvious choice, I think, for me, but I'm going to start with Matty.
Well, I'm sure there is an obvious choice for you, but I want to add some diversity in there. So I'm probably going to go for Daniel Kaluuya, however you say his name, for Get Out. He's not given too much range. I mean, I think obviously if you're able to play two different characters, I do believe he does have that range, and I just think what he did in comparison to everyone else in that film really stood out, and it just resonated with me more than the other films.
Yeah, I forgot to talk about the like his acting actually in the sunken place scene. That was really good. The way he slowly breaks down, like the tears slowly fall down his face. That's really impressive. Mason?
I went for Toni Collette in Hereditary. I think some of the scenes that she does, particularly the scene when she has that massive like emotional release at her son, and she's like saying like, I have to like look at you with that fucking face or whatever she says. It's just her acting is incredible. I think she portrays her character so well, and the struggle that she's like the struggle and all of that, the trauma that she's gone through.
Ross?
Yeah, I went for Toni Collette as well. I think her and the piece Nyong'o is probably some of the best acting you'll find in like a horror film. Definitely both in Oscar snubs, but yeah, I went for Toni Collette. As Mason said, there's just such great emotion behind what she does, and it really comes through, and her performance really, really drives the film as well.
Lupita. Okay, our unique category for the week. Scariest moment. Matty?
So I'm going to say for us, the scariest moment was when the boy, I forget his name, and then his tethered are both in the cupboard, and the cupboard's locked, and then they have the light, the little lighter or the match, I can't remember which it is, and the tethered takes off his mask and relieves his scars all over his mouth, and his mouth's pretty much not there, and then the light goes out. If I was that kid, I would have lost my shit, and like, on top of being like a little bit claustrophobic and scared of children and scars and all that rubbish, I would have lost it. I couldn't hack that.
Ross?
So I went for a moment in Hereditary, and I think one moment that really stands out is when Alex Wolff his character's in the classroom with his limbs and joints starting going like different directions, starts slamming his head against the desk. But I just couldn't help but ignore her just getting her head, the little girl just getting her head knocked off by the pole. Like before that, she's the main character, and you just don't expect it. And it's just so well done, like not actually showing her body and just the silence. That whole bit is just so well done. So yeah, I think I had to go for that.
Mason?
I went for a scene in Hereditary as well. It was when Toni Collette like scales the wall near the end of the film. I've never like watched something feel so like unnatural before in my life. The way she just like crawls up there is so disgusting. And then that scene's like really quickly followed by when she sprints after her son, and he's like running away as fast as he can. I can crease better now, but when I watched it in the cinema, I was shitting myself. So yeah, I'd say that scene.
My one is when he so the little kid comes into the room and he's like, "There's a family in our driveway," and just the whole vibe of them, these kind of ominous figures standing there in the driveway, just not necessarily terrifying, but just very, very unnerving, and it still is after several rewatches. Okay, yeah, I wish this was a Pop Vinyl award. Ross?
So there's us and there's us and Get Out ones about already. So let's go for one of the other films. So I went for Midsommar, where she's got the Florence Pugh has like the flower costume. I thought that would be really cool, all the colors and stuff.
Yeah, I've got the Get Out one and the Us one. They're two like the most elite pops, I think. And surprise, surprise, I went for the same idea that Ross had, her in the flowers. But you could have her not with the whole like flower gown on. I thought the one just when it just had like the kind of the head bit on, and the rest of her body was a bit more normal. Okay. Because I can't be asked to do another Twitter account. It's just my personal account from now on. So go to @LeonWait98 if you want to follow us and everything that we're doing. Create a cinema podcast.wordpress.com. Listen on Spotify, Google, Stitcher, Podbean. Next week, extraterrestrial films: Arrival, Prometheus, A Quiet Place, Men in Black. Until then, go well.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Well, I would have voted for Get Out a third week in a row if I could. It's not it, is it? It's not it. I would have voted for Get Out 3 times if I could. Fuck it, I don't care. I don't know it.
Why are we doing this